Welcome. It is Wednesday, November 13th. I'm here with Bill Thomas. How you doing tonight, Bill? How are you doing tonight, Bill? Bill is silent tonight. So we
Oh,
can't.
there we go. I was
Now
muted.
we hear him. Okay. How are you doing tonight, Bill?
I'm good. I'm
Now,
good.
now we're a little even. I screwed up and sent Bill the wrong link for tonight, and then I'm like, "Are you joining?" And then he was like, "I've been on for 10 minutes, but I'd sent him the wrong link." So I don't know if we're even, we're here. Hey, what we're gonna do tonight is do a quick rundown of three topics, and I'm gonna throw up here the topics that we're gonna cover. If I get it right, there we go. So the topics that we're going to cover tonight, I've kind of lumped them into three, really three categories. One is what I describe as the aftermath of the Trish Lambeck Banana Republic trial. And Tammy Brinkman, Louisa McQueen, who is not with us tonight, she is on hiatus, is what I'm going to say. And then palace intrigue around Jeff Corker. I put all that together. Then we're going to talk quickly about Alan Freeman. And then we're going to talk about something I think that Bill and I, hopefully, we're both pretty excited about that we're going to start doing. And probably, we haven't decided for sure, but maybe either do them or release them on Sunday evenings. And we'll talk about that in a second. What I'm going to do, I'm going to run through just kind of like a quick update on each of these things. And then we'll go just to Bill and me and talk about, hand it off to Bill to give his insights, views, and ideas around the three different topics as we go. And there's a lot on the first one, and I think the third one and the second one will be a little bit quicker. But the first thing has to do with the Trish Lambeck trial and the aftermath of that trial. So I had posted this on my Facebook last week about Jeff Corcoran, so to kind of, for anybody that might not know the background, there was an assault, and there absolutely was an assault that took place in the Clermont GOP meeting. The assault was committed by Trish Lambeck against Tina Tolan, and there was a trial, and the trial was absolutely rigged. And a special prosecutor, special fixer named Tyler Cantrell was the prosecuting attorney, and he made a slight mistake in that he never called the eyewitness to the actual assault, and that kind of undermined undermined getting a guilty plea. Slippery Scott Carswell was the defense attorney for what I called here Lion Lambeck. So I talked about this last week, but here's kind of the aftermath and some of the updates. First off, and anything I'm sharing, I've decided to share on my own, not with Bill's consent or his agreement necessarily to share it. But back after the trial on October 25th, Tammy Brinkman, who's the secretary of the Clermont GOP and was the eyewitness that was uncalled in the trial, she communicated to both Bill and me that she was going to resign as secretary for Union Township Republican Party and for the Clermont County Republican Central Committee immediately following the November election. She was pretty outraged about the not being called. She had come to three different hearings and was fully under the impression she was going to be called as the eyewitness to the event. Also, not a particular friend of either Louisa or Tina Tolan, so nobody could accuse her of having some bias. So on the 25th, which I think was a day or two after the trial, Tammy Brinkman sent a email to the court, to Paul Camphouse, the clerk, and Stephanie Boyer, the court administrator. And I highlighted a few pieces in yellow here. In that note said, as the only eyewitness to the incident and not being friends with either party, the prosecuting attorney should have relied on me to be a non-biased witness in support of the prosecution. And then I was within arm's length of the assault that occurred on February 21st. I saw the events that occurred and can say with absolute certainty the act was intentional, and that, my friend, makes it assault. It wasn't as portrayed in court that it was just some incidental headbutt that took place as Trish Lambeck was standing up. On November 7th, oddly, the judge waited more than a week. There clearly wasn't the basis to have a conviction. The judge, though, waited till after the election. That also seems rigged, that he waited more than a week till after the election to acquit Trish Lambeck. Jeff Corcoran, the head of the Central Committee, sent out an email. And, a professional person might have said in an email something like, let's put this behind us. Let's move forward. We have to be a team. But instead, Jeff Corcoran, in usual complete ass form, sends out a note that says, Trish Lambeck, one of our most active RCC members, and Bill, I think she is pretty active, right? So she's very active. Was exonerated of the bogus charges leveled by Tina Tolan and Louisa McQueen. Welcome home, Trish. Good job, Scott Croswell. So this is the absolute juvenile head of the Clermont GOP that plays favorites all the time and is totally and utterly biased in his behavior. So then Tammy on November 7th, because I think I texted her something, and it's like, okay, after Jeff's ass note, this would be a good time for you to make good on that resignation thing. And then she says, I'm 100% resigning as secretary. My professional inner self is struggling with the idea of simply walking away less than 2 weeks before the next meeting. I feel a sense of responsibility and commitment. Sorry, the commitment is the party and not the leaders. So she has not resigned. When I can jump back here, and I don't know if I'm confused reading, previously she said immediately following the November election. And so now we're moved it forward. Now, then what transpired was over the weekend, Louisa, a fairly, bullied member of the committee by Jeff Corcoran, a demonized, bullied, and a woman that, whatever you say about Louisa McQueen, is an authentic person and is not a backstabbing piece of manure like a lot of these people are, and did things during the campaign that covered the ass of the Clermont GOP multiple times, like when they had whatever Batavia Fest took place and nobody had planned to have the headquarters open for selling Trump merchandise. Louisa took it upon herself, while being bullied and treated like shit all of the time by Jeff Corcoran, to open the headquarters so we didn't look like complete clowns. And the thanks she gets is just more bullying and dismissiveness and just assholeness from Jeff Corcoran. And then I highlighted a line in here, except for a couple of you, this was her resignation note, you are all absolutely 100% dishonest, liars, and deplorable human beings because you are all in for yourselves. And that was part of that. So let's keep fast forwarding here. Then on November 12th, Jeff Corcoran sent out a note saying Louisa McQueen Goshen I has submitted her resignation. Jeff Corcoran never normally sends out individual resignation announcements. Those happen in the meetings, or they happen because of the chair of a particular township committee makes that announcement. But Jeff, probably gloating, probably whatever, sends this out. What's funny is I'm not on Jeff's email distribution list because he's selectively, that's another great sign of leadership. You selectively communicate with your committee that you're the leader of. Some people don't get your notes. I don't get his notes. But here's something funny. I don't know if I even told you this, Bill. I get them from several people, forward them to me. This version says Louisa McQueen Goshen I has submitted a resignation, but some people got a version that was different. It says Louisa McQueen has submitted her resignation from the RCC. So I don't know why. I would always put the most suspicious thing. Jeff probably is bothered that certain people get these notes. So maybe he's splitting up the list to try to figure out who's forwarding the notes. That's just the kind of sniveling stuff that a Jeff Corcoran and the Corcorans would do. So that is kind of the highlights. So I've kind of gone through, and I put up this, and I put one thing here before I'll switch back. Let's talk. So Bill, let me hand it over to you. You got the floor for as long as you want, just to kind of talk about how you see this, how it transpired, and where it sits right now in the drama that's taken place since the trial.
So The obviously we had a call about this trial, so I won't rehash a lot of those facts because it was very clear that the trial was a sham trial. It was thrown. I have spoken to people in the legal profession, and nobody disagrees that in a criminal trial, a key witness to an event that is there to testify that they witnessed the assault would never not be called to the stand. They would always be called to the stand. And if they are not being called to the stand, that trial is being thrown. And it was clearly thrown. But the arrogance to email about a trial that you had a part in throwing, because we saw Jeff Corcoran coming out of a locked courtroom previous to the trial starting. We don't know what was said, what was discussed. We just know Jeff was allowed to go into a locked courtroom, opened up by sheriff's deputies. We don't know where he went, but we assume that he had to have gone back to back. Why else would he go in a locked courtroom? So the fact that the sitting chairman of the committee not only partook in throwing the trial and had and orchestrated this, but then to blast out an email, which is breaking protocol because the secretary of the committee owns the responsibility of sending all communications to the committee. Furthermore, Jeff has never sent out an email about someone's resignation that unless he didn't like them. I believe he sent my resignation out. I have to go back and check, but I believe that's the last time he sent somebody's resignation out. Jeff has a pride issue. It is something that as a Christian, we try to stop and try to recognize in our lives and change in our lives. But those that aren't on that path, they have pride issues. Jeff has a pride issue, period, plain and simple. He will not succumb to that. He will continue to be this way, which is going to be a thorn in the Central Committee side, which takes us to this past Saturday when we had a private call between Byron Baxter, James Kidwell, Louisa McQueen, Tammy, and myself, Tammy Brinkman. And that call was called upon by Mr. Kidwell wanting to discuss options for another motion to remove Jeff Corcoran from the Central Committee. So we discussed it. At one point, I engaged David Painter into the call, and Louisa unleashed on him. And the reason Louisa unleashed on him is because Louisa and Tina Tolan have been victims in this Central Committee. They've been victims not just with the Trish Lambeck trial. They've been victims to their member rights being abolished from being allowed to be used. They're not allowed to make motions. Anytime they wanted to speak up, they were shut down. They were basically told, you don't have an opinion. And furthermore, Jeff has flat out said to Louisa, I would represent other people in this committee in a court, but I would never represent you as a favor. The idea of the chairman of a Central Committee is to be unbiased. It's not that much different than a judge in a county. A judge can be a Republican judge, but that judge's responsibility is to be an unbiased party. Doesn't matter if somebody is gay coming in before that judge and that judge is a Christian that believes homosexuality is a sin. They still have to treat that person without any bias. Their Christian belief cannot influence their judgment. Their Republican belief cannot influence their decision. That is how a judge has to rule. A Central Committee chairman has to have the same measures in which they chair a committee. It can have no bias. They can't say, I like this person more, I don't like this group of people. The fact that open discussion and debate has been prohibited in a committee that's a part that it has influence over politics and elections is absolutely preposterous. And it should never occur, but it has happened under this man's rule. So Louisa and Tina and a lot of other members, Ed Carter and several others, have had their members' rights violated on multiple occasions. So this Saturday was just kind of the icing on the cake when this leadership of the Central Committee said, no, we will not send out an email calling out these actions. No, we will not stand up in the Central Committee and call out Jeff Corcoran's bad behavior, sending these emails out, bragging about a thrown trial. If Chris Hicks did these things in a meeting, he would be suspended. He didn't even do these things in a meeting and was suspended. He was suspended, and I said, we'll argue this later, but his suspension was invalid. And I have argued that point because when I voted for Chris to be suspended, I was voting on Chris's conduct for years of how he's treated people online. That is why I voted for his suspension. Come to find out by Chris explaining this to me, because I didn't even know this until the other day, Chris was suspended for egregious actions during a meeting. No one else that voted that night, I believe full wholeheartedly, and I told Byron Baxter this on the phone this morning, I do not believe anyone in that meeting that voted that night believed that they were voting on Chris Hicks's actions within that meeting, because there was a thing displayed about Mike Logue's sugar daddy giving him $40,000, and everything about the suspension was centered around Chris Hicks posting, and Mike Logue's thin skin feelings got hurt, and his friend Jeff Corcoran put it out there because Jeff basically told Fraley and Mike, we're going to do something about this. I voted in a way that was not even the reason we voted. And I guarantee you many others voted that way. The entire Central Committee has been misled. Motions have come forward. We voted on things, and then it's been turned and said, well, actually, you voted on this, even though it was explained a completely different way, which is what I told Mr. Baxter this morning. I said, it's absolutely wrong to continue with Chris's suspension when all of us voted and thinking something completely different had happened. So I'm on the side that Chris should have the opportunity to have an actual trial, and his suspension should be lifted until that trial is further, because that trial was a sham, just like the trial with Trish Lambeck. And anyone that knows anything about the Corcorans, plural Corcorans, knows that everything they do is manipulation, lies, and self-focused on what it brings them to the table. So Louisa McQueen got to the point on that call where she said, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to listen anymore. This leadership won't stand up. Nobody wants to do anything to change it. And she sent out her resignation before that call was even ended. And that's a shame. That is what we call being bullied off the committee. Because when you take oath to be the chairman of the Central Committee, the chairman of the party, vice chair of both, it is your responsibility and duty to protect your members, period. And when you're not doing that, you're not fulfilling your duty. And in my opinion, you're breaking your oath, and that should be called out. Everybody that's an officer on that Central Committee should be called out for breaking their oath. If we can suspend Chris Hicks for something he didn't even do in a meeting, and we've got Jeff Corcoran doing things every meeting and violating rules, sending out emails from the Central Committee, why is he not being suspended? Why is Trish Lambeck not being suspended? I'll tell you why. Because they're friends of this little Gestapo group that has been created in the Central Committee, which has driven, in my opinion, Chris and I to have reconciliation between our issues, because it's so egregious that we don't even care about all the horrible crap that's gone on between us, that this is the focus. And guess what? Many, many others are going to start with the Central Committee and walk away for the same reason. That's all
I'm going to put up here again. This is the email that Corcoran sent out. Trish Lambeck, one of our most active RCC members, was exonerated of the bogus charges. And the bolding in here is original, okay? This is what Jeff had in there. The ones where I had yellow, I put the yellow highlight on there. But, again, a mature person would have said, this is the result. Let's put it behind us. Let's move forward as a team. But not Jeff Corcoran, because he actually... If I, Louisa, Bill, you, any of us, if we were dying in the street, Jeff Corcoran would let us die in the street, because it's not about any fairness or any of that. And I think that when I put this up, I'm going to come back to, to us. I think that one of the things that in this call that I think was a disappointment was that, David Painter, that you talked about, the call that you talked about, maybe I highlight, kind of what was being asked of David Painter and what happened and why did that go south with Louisa? Because you said he was added to the call after it was in process.
Simply all he was asked to do was send out an email calling out Jeff's bad behavior to the entire Central Committee. His response was he did not feel that in the world of government that is appropriate to have those emails. In other words, he would address this directly with Jeff Corcoran one-on-one, whether that's email, face-to-face, I have no idea. But corporately speaking, it's inappropriate for anybody in a body of government, or in this case, our central committee. It's just unprofessional to send out a blast to a group of people. My argument to that, which he disagreed on, and that's fine. David Painter is entitled to his opinion. He's allowed to disagree. My argument to that is, if the leadership were to send out an email like that, I think it would empower the members to say, okay, our leadership is ready to stand up finally, so we're going to stand with them. And I think the certain group of members and certain members would say, this is a real thing. Jeff is actually violating things. Jeff is doing things. But when your leadership and your officers sit quietly and the members don't see the people they elected to stand up, then nothing's going to be done. Imagine if Trump took office and he just did nothing. He just assumed the role of president and business as usual continued. We, as Trump supporters, would sit back and be like, what a disappointment. Wow.
I think
it would discourage us. It would discourage us.
I actually think that somebody like David Painter, based on what you're describing, he's supposed to be the chair of the party, not Jeff. See, the funny thing that people don't realize here is, one, the model for the party. Now, I violate it all the time, but I'm not in leadership. I'm not an officer. I'm not. Is that all communication should go through Tammy Brinkman? But Jeff Corcoran doesn't do that. He just does whatever he wants. And then, party chair David Painter is the one who's supposed to be communicating on behalf of the organization, not Jeff Corcoran. But Jeff Corcoran takes on every role, like a complete dictator. And from what you're saying, it's not that necessarily David Painter, I wasn't part of this call, but it's not necessarily that David Painter needed to send out a note, criticizing Jeff Corcoran necessarily. It would have been nice, though, for him to send out a note saying, as chair of the party, I think we need to get past this. We need to move forward. We need to treat each other with respect. And just something that was other than two members being cited as bogus charges when we know they were not bogus charges. That's what makes it so infuriating, is that it was obviously rigged. And then to send out a note saying that they're guilty of bogus charges just tells you that the person is an abject liar. And that nobody in the leadership, at least at present, nobody else in the leadership would even have the character to stand up to even say, hey, let's tamp it down, let's move forward, let's treat each other with respect. Right? I have said, I'm always being told I should be, why don't you shut up, Chris? We all need to come together. We need to do this. It's very interesting when the leaders themselves can't show that spirit. But if anybody dare criticize the leaders, they're accused of not coming together and working as a team.
I stayed off this. We had this call because we decided we were going to do this after the election. One thing I definitely want to do, and I want to give credit where credit's due, David Painter and his wife, Carla, worked very hard, many, many hours at the polls at the BOE to cover shifts. They absolutely deserve credit because they worked very hard. That point cannot be argued. So we left this alone until after the election because we felt that trying to put additional stress on during this election, we don't want to have an impact. So we waited till after the election was over. I think for Louisa, it was, well, we've got Thanksgiving, James telling Louisa, you got Thanksgiving coming up, so you can't do it then. Then you got Christmas. Then you got again in next year. We got to be focused on there's always something, the Lincoln dinner, this, that, or the other. There's always a reason not to do it. So we agreed that this was an important election and we wanted to see Republicans win. So I'd asked everybody to kind of tone it down till after the election and let's hit it then. So here we are, we hit it. And that was the response. And I think it was just over. Louisa had just hit her peak and she definitely tore in to David Painter and just chewed him out. Up and down on that call, and that was that. And it's disheartening to me that we as Republicans have an opportunity to bring a lot of change in America, not just with Trump. If we just elect Trump and we throw Trump into office and we say, okay, put our feet up, we're going to sit back for the next 4 years. That is how we lost the last time. I mean, election fraud. I'm on board with all that. I 100% agree with everything that happened. Why Trump didn't get it. It was 15 million missing votes this election. But
it's down to 10 million. Just to be fair, it's down to 10
we're
million.
down to 10. Whatever. The dead didn't vote this time. The regardless, if we all just sit back as seat warmers and we just let everybody else carry the load, we're going to be right back where we were in 4 years. We can't let off the throttle. That our job is not to get these guys elected and say, okay, our job is done. Our job is to get them elected and support them and encourage them and challenge them and debate them and make sure that they're doing and working for us. And when we fail to do that, we're failing to do our job as citizens of this country. You know, there are people in our military that give their lives, their freedoms. They're not with their kids. They're not with their wives. Their wives go to bed every night without their man in bed, or a wife in the military with their husband going to bed with the kids every night alone. They make extreme sacrifices for this country. The least that we can do as American citizens is back our elected officials and make sure they're working correctly for us. And when they're not, we need to step up, stand up, and do something about it. But we have a central committee right now. I don't care who it upsets or who gets mad at me for saying this. We have a central committee right now that is an elected body of no one that does nothing. And that is the demise of this Republican Party. And it's awful. And it needs to change.
So Dan Bongino, by the way, I can always refer to Dan Bongino, but there's things I do and don't like about Dan Bongino. But he made this point about coming into the election a long time ago, that the Trump brand is very strong and the Republican brand is very weak. And think about it. Why is it that as you get further away from Trump, you don't see the results? So Trump gets a landslide up here. We pick up some Senate seats, which is great, but we don't really pick up any House seats, right? So where's the red wave? Why do we not have red waves? And because the point, I think it goes with, I think what you're saying, Bill, is that even people that love Trump are realizing a lot of the people that are Republicans are as bad as the Democrats. And yes, you see that with that Thune guy getting elected Senate majority leader. It's like, and so everybody that's out there that loves Trump, loves good stuff, you know, keep listening to this call to learn about the Central Committee, about this what goes on in our own county, but also keep in mind that after Trump's landslide, we have to be more diligent than ever because we cannot trust people on our own team. Like we have to be up there, you know what, to make sure that these people do what they need to do to move our country forward. Why don't we move on to the next topic in this mix? And by the way, well, there's one last thing I want to say. You know, Louise is on hiatus. We're all of us have good and bad points, positives and negatives, but I will say absolutely no question, Louisa is an authentic person, not a piece of crap backstabber shitbag like pretty much a lot of these people are. So whatever each of our flaws are, our flaws aren't. You know, the continual bad treatment of people who are elected people or legally appointed people, you know, is just reprehensible. That the chair of the Central Committee does not believe that the voters who elected these people to the committee have the right to have their own people elect them and be treated with respect. Any other comments, Bill, before I move on to the next topic?
I think we've said enough.
Okay,
on
that. so the next thing I want to hit on is Alan Freeman. So Alan Freeman is, you know, a special attention from me, and on what he does and what's involved. And I wanted to put on here Alan Freeman because so what happened with Alan Freeman, just so everybody knows, and I've heard me say it before, in the 2020 primary, beyond dark money spend of Growth and Opportunity PAC as part of the Larry Householder corruption scheme, beyond the dark money side of it, Alan Freeman had $280,000 spent on his campaign of dark money, of bribe money, that was done under the banner of paid for by the committee to elect Alan Freeman. He never reported any of it. He never paid any of it. I drove to Columbus like probably 15, 20 times in a bunch of OEC hearings that took over a year. He got ultimately found in violation or guilty. He was assessed a $50,000 fine. He appealed that all the way up to the Supreme Court. He lost all of his appeals. He's due that fine, but he never updated his campaign finance reporting to show the $280,000 that got spent on his campaign. And the reason why he can't is because it was done by a corporation, Constant Content, which was part of the Larry Householder bribe scheme. And if he reports it on his campaign finance report, it's equivalent of a felony. It's equivalent of a felony to receive money up to a year in prison offense. They have accepted money from a corporation as part of a campaign. The other option he has is if he shows it as in kind, it's a felony. The other option he has is to pay it, which then he owes $280,000, and they're out there collecting this money, and he owes the money. And so I just wanted to highlight this here because Alan Freeman got elected to clerk of courts. So now he has a much bigger taxpayer paid paycheck along with his trustee paycheck to be garnished to pay the $280,000 he owes, or he can get a cell in the penitentiary for accepting corporate campaign contributions without ever reporting them or paying them. And so that's why I wanted to put Alan Freeman in here real quick, because it's so repulsive to me that politicians act like this and they're so crooked. And I'll just say one other thing, and then I'll see if you have any comments on this one, Bill. But at the end of like a year of hearings, one of the commission members of the board of the Ohio Election Commission, which is a rigged organization, says, after all said and done, it was a violation of plain sight. And it was. It should have been taken like 5 minutes for him to admit it, but he just refused to admit it. And it's kind of the arrogance. It's kind of funny, Bill, when you say like people not willing to admit mistakes, people not willing to send emails, people not willing to do this. It seems to be like a disease in the political class. All right. Do you have anything to say about Alan Freeman?
I got to be honest. That whole thing that you've been running with for years, aside what I told you that I've met him at when it all started, I asked him about it at Bob Evans that one time. I don't know anything about this issue other than what I read on your site, so I don't need to waste anyone's time on it.
Okay. So though he was, he's guilty, and it's interesting because like I said, he's got a new big, probably close to over six-figure paycheck going to come on our dime. We're going to be making sure, I'm going to be making sure that he's paying back his campaign debts. He's reporting his campaign finance. And you know what else I'm going to be making sure of? He's showing up for work every day. Because I think he's the kind of person that would take the check and never show up for work. And that's another disgusting aspect of some of these politicians, that they don't go to work. In his defense, I say a lot of bad things about David Painter. I think David Painter goes to work every day. Barb Wiedenbein went to work every day down there in Batavia. So that's step one. Linda Fraley doesn't go to work every day. And just so people know, the idiotic laws of Ohio, that a typical county level elected official that gets a full-time paycheck, they only have to come to work once every 90 days legally. The treasurer and auditor, I believe it is, have to come to work once every 30 days. There's a funny story about how when Linda was vacationing in Florida in the winter, doing a paycheck, she had to fly back because the law had been changed to have the 30-day requirement for auditor and treasurer. And she almost missed the 30-day requirement because of being out of the state in Florida. So it's just disgusting, all that sort of stuff. So let's hope Alan Freeman does a great job at clerk of courts and gets. I'm wondering on clerk of courts. By the way, Bill, you remember when Paul Camphouse and Tim Brunn were running for clerk of courts, and we were going to get a new docketing system and e-filing? What happened to any of that? It's been like 2 years. We still have the same docketing system. We still have to have a fax machine to file stuff or show up in person, and so there's still a lot of work to be done. Okay, our third and final topic is my idea of what we're going to do. If you'd like, you can explain it, and then I'm going to put up a page of what the first 5 episodes are going to be. Would you like to explain what our plan and agreement is on what we're going to do?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So we're going to we're going to talk about some of the things in our future episodes that will maybe Chris and I don't 100% agree or align on. And the first couple of topics, for example, there's been my challenge to Chris, Ken Geis, Union Township, before the current trustee board with the previous trustee board. Things that I think just things we need to talk about, other things that Chris and I do agree on, kind of the ethics of Mike Logue. I was once on the opposition of that, and then, I kind of woke up and started seeing what was really going on, and I got to say, very disappointed, 100% disappointed. I take no joy in seeing what Mike Logue has become, because I really believe Mike Logue could have been a great political figurehead for Clermont County had he taken the right path. But when you sell out, and it shines quick, especially when you sell out this early. If you can't even get past being a trustee and becoming a sellout, you have absolutely no political future whatsoever.
So let me jump us back, okay? So in the what we're going to do category. So Bill and I, with Louise, a lot of time have discussions offline, and we never talked for years, right? Other than in a impeachment hearing or something. Okay, we never talked for years. And then we talk and we realize that certain events we have each seen from a perspective that's entirely different. Okay. And so then we get talking, and Bill will say something about Ken Geis and me, and I'll say, like, did you know this? And he'll say, did you know this? And we'll get into this discussion where we learn a lot about some of these events. You also learn some, this one has nothing to do with Ken Geis, where some of these cases, we get played, by people for their purposes. And so we thought it would be interesting to have some streams where we cover some of the most, I would say generally most controversial topics. It kind of started with particularly some of the topics where I am particularly evil, and have done, satanic things and all that kind of stuff. But then what we did was we came up with a list of about 30 things, about 30 things, from Linda Fraley to what was his name? The case against the party, I forget the guy's name.
Lewis Carter
case against the party, and I told Bill, like, we can have conversations on these, and as far as I'm concerned, no question is off limits. You can ask me anything you want, challenge me on anything you want, and it's, I guess, vice versa, on the things, and that we think we're at a point where we can have discussion of these things that we think would be very informative and capture some history that's gone on in this stuff, where we do the best job that we can of bringing receipts and getting to the facts, because both of us in our different where we were standing when these things happen would come out with different perspectives. And then when we compare notes, we realize, hey, maybe, somewhere in the middle is where some of these things are. So this is the first 5 topics. So what we did was we had the list of like 30. Bill picked 5 of them off of the list to be the first 5. And then I put them in the order. It might not be that different of an order. I don't know if it's that different, but so the first one we're going to do is everything. Bill's gets to ask me anything he wants about Ken Geis, my relationship with Ken Geis, why I quote unquote didn't hold Union Township to task, my history with that. The second one is my suspension, which we're talking about here. This is from the Clermont County Republican Central Committee, because we have like how it got, what was happening, Bill's involvement on the planning of it, and then from my perspective, what happened, in it. Michael Logue and how Michael Logue has evolved or devolved. The Greg Simpson experience, which is all the stuff that was going on with Greg Simpson, where we've been in different positions, where it's happened, where he comes after my kid and me, he comes after threats, claims to hack my computer, this kind of stuff. And then finally, my impeachments. So when I was the head of Union Township Republican Central Committee, I think I was impeached 4 times, and there was 1 trial. And so talking about that, because we were totally on opposite sides of those issues at that point in time. So those will be the first 5 topics, and we'll see if we haven't killed each other by the end of those 5. We can go to the next 5
If
on
we're
the
still
list.
talking, we'll see if we're still talking by then. Which, I don't see it being a problem. I mean, what's sad is everything other than number one. I think we've succumbed to agree on everything else on that list. Number one was the only one that I think that we still have any outstanding discussion on, but I don't believe his suspension is right. And everybody knows how I feel about Greg Simpson and Logue. And the impeachments, honestly, it was just me being used by Fraley and them to try to promote their agenda. I think that's what happened with Joe Dills also. Joe Dills was the first one to try to impeach you. And I think it kind of the same thing happened. He probably got the same pressure I got to move forward with it. And yeah, things we'll talk about.
We could do one in the weave in there. Because the constant thing with me that has been a source of a lot of this stuff is, and we can have different perspectives on it. And I'm sure we're gonna have different perspectives on some of these things. But there's always a root of it of my Facebook page, right? The stuff I put on my Facebook page and the suspension and the impeachments and all that kind of stuff. And right, wrong, or indifferent, one of the things that'll be interesting about it is, in your Facebook page also, Bill, has been putting out in public shit that's not supposed to be out in public. Because the system is oriented towards keep it secret. Keep it like a pedophile priest in the Catholic Church of old. Keep it secret. We don't. We're only going to hurt them if they know. So that should be fun to do that. Series. And
what's funny? You said that triggered something. Isn't it amazing how the pedophile manager over the city of Milford, all of that just poof?
What has happened? You know what? That crossed my mind. What happened with Michael Doss? So
I have no knowledge of anything that's transpired. Last discussion I had with that sheriff's department up there was that they were looking at indicting him, but at that time, no charges have been given.
Somebody asked me today, before we wrap up here, somebody asked me today about what happened with the embezzlement at Clermont Senior Services. So it's amazing how these things, when they involve like insider people, they just suddenly kind of just go like, what happened? Because remember, even the Metropolitan Housing Authority, people might not know this. So there was embezzlement at Metropolitan Housing Authority. There was embezzlement at Clermont Senior Services. There's a pedophile city manager in Milford. Okay. And it all just kind of dissipates, and you never hear about it again. And the Metropolitan Housing Authority, that disappeared for like a year and a half, and then some guy just turns up in the news convicted. And but nobody's ever held accountable for the poor internal controls that result in these embezzlement schemes. And there were other embezzlement schemes too. And someday I'm going to come back around on this whole thing. And you, Bill, you might know a little bit what I'm talking about. Nobody will know what I'm talking about. But Doug Utter, the black woman in the pond, the county water resources, and all that stuff. It's just these things go on, and the system just covers them up. And maybe some flunkies held accountable or lose their job, but the rest of the organization that should have captured the problem and these problems never is. Okay, so those are our 3 topics. Any kind of last thoughts that you want to hit on, Bill?
No, I think it's all good. I think it's just disheartening, again, that we as Republicans allow this kind of stuff. Republicans are supposed to be conservative. I wouldn't say every Republican's Christian. That's a broad statement. But I do believe the Republican Party aligns with Christianity and Christianity values. You tend to see more Christians being on the red side of things because we align pro-life. We believe in a true equality, not this equality that liberal America has created. That's a DEI, imbalanced equality, if that's a term. But I believe that we got to, as a party, get back to holding our peers accountable and bringing integrity back into it. Right. And part of that is just, I believe, whether you're a Christian or not, if you believe in God, following what God has for us as humans on this earth, we would be doing the right thing. But I don't think our politicians, save a handful, believe in that. And that's
I put it simpler in that I'm obviously a Christian, but I put it as the difference in, well, you know what's funny? Who did I hear say this? The difference is, oh, this is Tucker Carlson. The differences we have now is not so much on policy things. Now, there's all kind of policy things we can be different on, okay? And Tucker would get it. But the point is, people that are telling the truth and people that are lying. People that are telling the truth and people that are lying. And when it comes to Christian, my thing is, I don't think, my thing is, I think it's people that accept that there is a higher power from which our rights are derived and people who don't. Okay. People who think the government is the source of those rights versus, so whether you're Jewish, Hindu, even Muslim, and you believe that your rights come from God or from a higher power, not from a government, that's a huge demarcation line. So when we see our children and stuff having less faith, not being part of any faith community, they start to substitute something else for that. And that becomes the kind of liberal shit you see, Bill, in the schools, the indoctrination, the religion of LGBT, transgenderism, all that kind of stuff. It fills the void of what do you believe in when you don't believe in a higher power and that your rights come from a higher power. So, any event. So, anything else that you want to hit on?
Nope, I think we're good. We wrapped up in under an hour.
I know it's a big, but we would have rather had Louisa not be bullied in the way that she has been bullied and gone an extra 10 minutes. But
100%. I mean, Louisa brings a very valuable viewpoint to this podcast, and but I get it. I was in her place several months ago, and I just threw my hands up and said I'm resigning from this sham of a committee because I could not be a part of what I was seeing any longer.
Right.
I mean, it was disgusting, but anyways.
Well, thank you all for listening, and look for, I think what the goal is going to be to make this kind of a shorter, more succinct, kind of quick update call. And then Bill and I are going to start this series of calls. And then the third thing that I never really did, but was one of the original intents, was Clermont U to have some pre-recorded things on stuff like how to do a records request, how to do a private citizen affidavit, stuff like that has persistence. And I think that'll have persistence. And I think, Bill, the things that we're going to do here will be very valuable to have forever. Okay. Think if somebody would have done that, the technology existed back when, say, Archie Wilson was commissioner, and there was something you could go watch of people that were living at that time involved in those events, hashing them out. So, we'll start with the 5 and then we'll go from there. And then hopefully we'll have a pretty good series of rundowns of things that will be there persistently that people can watch. Thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of the evening, Bill. Have a great rest of the evening, everybody else.